Hi friends, my name is Emily and welcome back to my channel. There were some technical difficulties with the visuals for this video. Instead of refilming the whole thing, because at the end of the day it's the words that matter with bookish talk, I've decided to give you a photo of my dog Boseph curled up on the couch, looking cozy, and I invite you to get cozy, grab a cup of tea, think of this as a podcast, and listen to me chat about my November and December reads. Without further ado, let's get into the audio. November was not a great reading month for me, very slumpy in fact. I only read 4 books and they were spaced out at the very beginning and very end of the month. The first book that I read was The We Free Men by Terry Pratchett. So this is the first book in the Tiffany Aching series and I finished it because there was a patron live show for it, and that is what motivated me out of this reading slump that I've basically been in for the past month or so. It didn't impact my enjoyment of this book, I have to say. I'm glad. This is a 5-star read for me. So this is the story of Tiffany Aching, who discovers that she is the replacement Witch of the Chalk. She is going to follow in the footsteps of her grandmother, Granny Aching, who was the secret Witch of the Chalk. And she discovers that she is a witch when, how do I describe this? Her brother is captured by this like parasitic, traveling pocket dimension that is ruled over by an evil queen. And so with the help of these tiny angry blue Scottish pixies, the We Free Men, Tiffany Aching goes on this journey into this dimension, into this pocket dimension to rescue her brother, and hilarity ensues. This is my second dip into the Discworld series and it was so much fun. It actually inspired me to continue on with the series, which is exciting. I really liked getting a taste of what magic is like in the Discworld. And what I'm interested in now that I'm heading back to the beginning of the series and visiting with wizards Rincewind in the Unseen University, I'm curious to see how gender and magic are at play, because Pratchett himself has talked about how like witch has this terrible archetype. Witches are always bad. They're building houses out of candy to capture children, to trick people, to put warts on you, to eat children like Roald Dahl's witches, right? And so he talks about how he wants to equalize men and women with his wizards and witches. And so now that that's in my head as a thing that he was actively trying to do at some point with his writing, I am so excited to continue with the rest of this series. This book, in and of itself, as like a step into the Discworld, 5 out of 5 stars. I would definitely recommend this. This was fun, this was funny, and despite the reading slump, it brought me so much joy. The We Free Men, I gave 5 out of 5 stars. I finished it on November 1st. It was from my TBR. It's been sitting on my TBR for a long time. The next book that I read for the first time, I read this twice, once in November and once in December for the Patron live show, is Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu. This is super gay. This is your classic sapphic vampires. We have a young woman named Laura who is reflecting on this time when after a random carriage accident her father takes stewardship, takes care of this mysterious maiden named Carmilla, and then a whole bunch of freaky shit starts happening. Carmilla only comes out at night, she sleeps late, she's ill, the women around their home start dying of a mysterious illness, and then Laura falls ill with that illness. It was just so much fun. Like, I love Dracula. Dracula is a good read, but it is an undertaking. It requires dedication, it requires focus. This is a classic that predates Dracula. Carmilla comes before Dracula, and it is, I find, infinitely more readable. It has a lot of similar tropes, similar vibes that Dracula will sort of standardize, but Carmilla has it too. Carmilla has these delicious gothic vibes. It's super gay. Like, there's no way around that this is super gay. And something that I wondered about in the live show is if that queerness in any way, shape, or form has impacted the preference of one text over the other. Because you think if you're going to teach a gothic vampire horror text, why would you make kids read a chonker like Dracula when you could make them read a little pip like Carmilla? You can talk about Victorian anxieties around female sexuality, foreigners, the wilderness, Britishness, like all of the same themes are here in Carmilla, except it's super fucking gay. Carmilla and Laura are like heavy breathing, kissing each other on the neck. You don't have to read between the lines, it's there in the text. They are fucking. and it's two ladies fucking. I finished this on November 21st, which is quite a jump. You can see a huge gap in time between The Wee Free Men and Carmilla, and this was a new buy for the book club. Then I read A Ghost in the Throat by Doireann ní Ghriofa. I have a clip of the author saying her own name.
My name is Doireann ní Ghriofa.
This is a slow read. It is not at all what is pitched on the dust jacket. The dust jacket is so misleading. On discovering her murdered husband's body, an 18th century Irish noblewoman drinks handfuls of his blood and composes an extraordinary lament. Which is true, but that's like just a snippet of what this is about. So our narrator is a mother. The mother becomes obsessed with this poem. She read it as a young person and she reads it again as a mother, and it's not at all what she remembers, and she becomes obsessed to do archival research and find out about Evelyn and her life. And what she runs into again and again is that women are missing from the archives of history. She can find where Evelyn's husband is buried, where her son is buried, where his grandson is buried, but like she doesn't know how Evelyn died, when she died, where she's buried. She, like, that women's record is lost. She can find Evelyn in men's letters. Evelyn has nothing left other than this poem, this super famous poem about the death of her husband. It becomes a fascinating look at the huge gaps and silences that are in history and how much imagining we have to do to try and fill in the gaps if we want to recover women's stories, these like lost stories, because women were property, they weren't people, they didn't have voting rights. At certain points in history, the only way to trace certain women is through their connections to men. And if men have not documented them, if men have not written them into the documents that archive their own lives, these women just disappear from history. They are these huge silences. And for me, more than anything, that is what stands out. On top of that, we have musings on motherhood, and that probably might jump out to somebody who is a parent more than it does myself. For me, as somebody who has an academic background, it's the archival research, that compulsion, that exasperation, that that love for the research that really stands out about this text. I would say that if you are interested in women throughout history, if you are interested in Irish literature, Irish poetry, I would say it's decently slow paced, but despite being really slow paced, I found it a very compelling read. Like, I spent a lot of time on this. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I finished it on November 24th, and this was a new buy. The last book that I have here is a graphic novel, a young adult graphic novel called The Girl from the Sea by Molly Knox Ostertag. So Molly Knox Ostertag wrote The Witch Boy, which is a really cute queer graphic novel, debatably trans graphic novel. Again, we have a similar theme explored here. So we have a girl who meets a Kelpie, and so there's the idea of changing skins, of being yourself, and our protagonist, Morgan, is secretly gay. Her friends don't know that. She meets a girl named Kelty and they fall in love, and they have this beautiful summer romance that really allows Morgan to feel confident to come out. And it was really cute. It's not my favorite of Molly Knox Ostertag's works, which is why I'm only giving it 3 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed her Witch Boy books more. I think they're also, like, just in terms of art, I mean, it's a graphic novel, so we have to judge the art. The Witch Boy books are more in like an aesthetic color palette that speaks to my my taste. This is a little more, I would say this is a little less aesthetic. Like the Witch Boy graphic novels have more of a dark purple and red and black aesthetic. This is definitely more summery and like true to life, and I tend to prefer graphic novels that are more stylized. Cute story, fun read. I would definitely recommend picking it up if you have an opportunity. It's a fun, quick little read, and it's just, it's warm. It's a warm hug, and we're looking for that. So I gave that 3 out of 5 stars. I finished it on November 28th, and that was a new buy. So these were the 4 books that I read in November that I didn't bother filming a video for because I didn't have time and there weren't that many books. Then we move into December, which has been a bit of a mixed bag. So I was very much in a reading slump, feeling very down, had very little motivation to create any content because I wasn't reading. I felt like I had nothing to offer, and so I decided to do a reread and a vlog for the Alanna. Half of these are upside down. The Alanna the Lioness books by Tamora Pierce. So this is the Song of the Lioness Quartet. This is a well-loved old staple, and I'm not going to talk too much about these. I'm going to link the vlog above. I do go through this quite in-depth each book. It's quite a spoilery review and discussion of the series. I will say that my eyes are definitely more drawn to discussions around race and colonialism and the potential for this being a queer or trans narrative. I would love to do slightly more essay style, more academic work on these, and hopefully that will happen in the new year. So I finished Alanna the Lioness First Adventure on December 5th, finished In the Hand of the Goddess. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars on December 5th. I finished Woman Who Rides Like a Man on December 7th. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Not a favorite. It's a little hot mess of a book. And then I finished Lioness Rampant on December 9th, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Similarly, it's a little bit of a hot mess of a book. Overall, I enjoyed rereading these 4 books. It did what I needed it to do. It got me out of the reading slump, and for that I am thankful. In between the Lioness books, I finished listening to It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. So It Happened One Summer is about a girl named Piper who's sort of like a Kim Kardashian kind of person, living a very like frivolous, wants to be Kim Kardashian life, spends a lot of time partying, wasting daddy's money, getting in trouble, and after a stunt that is just too big, her daddy ships her off to her biological father's bar in a isolated fishing village, and her sister volunteers to go with her, and the two of them have this brainwave that if they can refurbish the bar and turn it into a thriving business and prove it to their adopted daddy that he will let them come home and continue their life, and give them their allowances again, I guess, or at least give Piper an allowance. I don't know if the sister is cut off or if she just volunteered to go along for moral support. I can't quite remember that part. Of course, because this is the author of the Hot and Hammered series, she meets a sexy boat captain and they do sexy things together all around the town on boats, etc. I will say that I enjoyed this one a little bit more than the Hot and Hammered books. The Hot and Hammered books had some like questionably abusive relationships. The men in those books were weirdly possessive of their women, and on top of that, everybody in the Hot and Hammered books had like genitals that were like compared to tools because there was like carpentry stuff happening, or baseball bats because one of them was a retired baseball bat. Pretty sure in one of the Hot and Hammered books there is the actual line, a penis pwangs out of somebody's pants, and I just wanted to die. I didn't notice quite as much cringe in It Happened One Summer. It was just light, fluffy romance, joy. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I finished that on December 7th and I borrowed that. Then I reread Carmilla in preparation for the live show. I always reread the books, so a lot of the things that I have done this year have been like reading the first time just to get it in my noggin, and then rereading with like pen in hand, making notes about what I want to talk about for the live show, finding the quotations, all that jazz. So not too many new revelations on the reread. I did finish this on December 8th. Again, it was a pleasure to reread, and rereading it only like underlined how fucking gay this is. If you want gay lady vampires in your life, Carmilla. Then I finished The Sister Who Ate Her Brothers and Other Gruesome Tales by Jen Campbell, illustrated by Adam de Souza. So this is creepy fairy tales. Jen has collected 14 creepy fairy tales from around the world and done little retellings of them, often queering them or playing with gender, playing with disability and disfigurement, and challenging it as it would normally occur in fairy tales. The illustrations are not super to my taste, but again, this is meant for children. Like, I think I would have preferred if they were a little bit more gruesome and a little bit less cartoonish, because the stories themselves, being fairy tales, are quite dark, but then the illustrations are kind of cartoony, but then it's meant for kids, so of course they're not going to be as like grotesque as they possibly could be. Overall, I enjoyed dipping in and out of this collection. I thought the tales were fun. I wish the whole thing was more in the style of what is happening on the cover than what is inside in terms of illustrations. As a complete package, I am giving this 3 out of 5 stars. I think if we take the illustrations out, I think the stories themselves are 4 out of 5, but because the illustrations are part of the package and they're not working for me, I'm giving it 3 out of 5 stars. I finished that on December 13th, and that was a pre-order and a new buy for me this year. And one of my goals this year was to read my pre-orders, so I did it. I pre-ordered it and I read it. Then I borrowed from Libby The Maidens by Alex Michaelides, and The Maidens was odd. In part, it's the narrative perspective. Our protagonist, Marianne, is a group therapist. Basically, she's had the worst life ever. Marianne has lost her family, she's lost her parents, she's lost her sisters, she has adopted her niece, and then her husband dies. So like, the tragedy surrounds Marianne, and she's a group therapist. On her niece's campus, there's a murder, and the niece knows the person who is murdered, so she travels out to the campus that she used to attend university, and she becomes obsessed with this weird cult. There's this hot young English professor who has this group of girls around him that he call themselves the Maidens, and it seems very like culty and sinister, and she's convinced that something is awry there. I like the ideas in theory. A woman cannot have ever laid eyes on this manuscript. Let me say that. Marianne has no personality other than the fact that she is sad because her husband died, and also she is very cool and casual about being stalked by multiple men. Like, you want to talk about university professors starting a weird Greek sex cult on campus? Sure. The least believable thing about this book, the ridiculousness of the twist as well. Like, the twist makes no sense. It's only a shock because literally there are no clues. I'm 100% convinced that if you turn it around and knowing the twist, you go back and you look for the clues, they are not there. Unless you are heavily reading between the lines and being a little bit suspicious, there's no clue. You could never guess the twist. I actually don't know if being familiar with the Greek myths would give you any sort of leg up. While I was reading it, I was intrigued. It was something that I was excited to keep listening to, but then the twist happens and you're like, oh, that makes no sense. And then when you sit and you think about, well, what the fuck did I just read? You're like, oh no, this is really bad. This is really bad. And a woman clearly never read this manuscript because, like, yes, losing your husband is sad, but also she's a therapist. She should have like good coping skills. She has a therapist. You would think also that having lost so much in her life that she would be relatively practiced about like functioning like a normal human, having interests other than being sad that her husband is dead. She has absolutely no personality, like no character traits, and it's fucking annoying. At the time when I finished this book, I gave it 3 to 5 stars. That review is probably still on Goodreads. I haven't gone back and changed it. Thinking about it now, I am so angry. Like the more it percolates, the less sense it makes and the less I feel like it deserves all of the hype. This, I think, being generous, is a 2-star read for me. I can see why you would find it engaging. I myself was engrossed in it, but I don't think it's worth the hype. I think the payoff of this mystery is not worth the hype. I finished that on December 18th and I borrowed that from Libby. Then I finished The Light Fantastic by Terry Pratchett. So this is the second book in the Discworld series. We are following Rincewind on some misadventure. So Rincewind is a failed wizard because he has one of these 8 big spells in his head, and that spell is so big and powerful it scares away all the other spells. So Rincewind is this like failed wizard basically, and he is guiding a traveler called Two Flower, I believe. There is a star that is coming towards the Discworld. It looks like it's going to collide with it, and this wizard named Trimond steals the rest of the spells, steals power, and is going to try and stop it. And he also needs that 8 spell from Rincewind, so there's like a hunt of Rincewind happening and like hijinks ensue, and it's just fun. It's just fun. The wordplay, the puns, the ridiculousness of like subverting common fantasy tropes. I loved it. I had so much fun with this. I do wish that I had read this closer to the first book because the first 2 books are very much connected. They are both following Rincewind, and then the third book will deviate. I mean, I managed to like go and find a summary and get the gist of it myself of what happened in The Color of Magic and then pick this up, and this was fun. This was just fun. I needed this like win. I needed some wins after November being such a bleh reading month. I gave this 4 to 5 stars. This was part of a 5-star predictions video. I didn't enjoy this as much as I thought, but I still had so much delight out of this. Like, a 5-star is a perfect book for me. It ticks all of my boxes. It makes me happy and like delighted in ways that you can't like super rationally explain to other humans. This was fun. I enjoyed it. I would recommend it, but it's not a 5-star read for me. Finished it on December 19th, and this was from my TBR. I tried getting back into The Last Graduate by Naomi Novik. This is a book that has really stalled me. I'm going to blame in part for the reading slump that I was in is just struggling through this. I really enjoyed the first book, A Deadly Education, and I was willing to forgive the amount of info dumping because Novik was establishing a fantasy world in a fantasy school where the kids were at the end of their education, basically. So it's not like Harry Potter where we're starting at the very beginning where we have a character to learn the ropes with. We're starting near the end at a character who's about to graduate. And so I was willing to accept a significant amount of info dumping in the first book to build the world. And what I wanted from The Last Graduate was for Novik to finally play with this world full of mouths, these creatures that want to eat child wizards. I wanted to see her play with this wacky, dangerous wizard school, and I wanted to see Elle really develop. By the end of A Deadly Education, we see her finding a group of friends, finding this alliance to work and graduate together, right? And instead what we got was a plot that could fit on like a cue card and more info dumping. I decided to DNF this, so I got stuck on this. Then I went back to it. I read like another 80 pages to give it another shot, and it's just so much info dumping. I stopped at the point where the graduating class is trying, they have this like obstacle course almost. The school builds them this like practice course, and I had witnessed Elle go through with various groups of students various times, and like you watch them do the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, and you're like, fuck, like what, like I want you to do something with the characters. I don't need more world building. I don't need more information about new scary mouths. I don't need more rehashing of like Elle resisting and stealing power and being dangerous and the school being wacky. I wanted fucking character development. I wanted her to play with what she had, not continue to info dump. And I made the call after looking at Goodreads reviews, and a lot of people have very much the same issues with this. Like they cannot with the info dumping. It continues through the rest of the book. However, a lot of 2-star readers were saying that the book ends on a cliffhanger, and despite the fact that they hated this book, they are excited for the 3rd book. Life is short. I have many unread books. This book was just dragging me down and making me angry. Maybe one day I'll borrow the 3rd book on audio, listen to it at like 2 or 3 times speed to get through all the info dumping, to get to the last 50 pages where we will have that big exciting conclusion that, like the 1st book, A Deadly Education, followed that same formula. Info dumping, exciting conclusion, cliffhanger. The 2nd book, according to these Goodreads reviews, is info dumping, and then in the last 50 pages, exciting shit happens and a cliffhanger. So I can only imagine that the 3rd book will follow the same formula. No thank you. I'm done with this. I DNF'd it on December 10th, and this was a new buy. It was a pre-order. I tried it. I'm done. I made a mistake. So at this point, December 20th, I have nothing left on my currently reading shelf on Goodreads except for Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, which I started because I wanted to get on that pandemic hype, that pandemic lit hype, but then got bogged down in it being pandemic lit and really depressing. And I decided to plow through with it anyway, and it just got better and better. I sort of had stopped at a point where the pandemic was getting too big and too real, and I was like, oh no, I can't. But then when I persevered, it was a lot more in the present or in the pre-pandemic past, and we're sort of watching these various characters interlock and come together, and I actually really enjoyed this. In the end, watching people rebuild, watching people find each other and care for each other was wonderful. There were moments where it did get a little hard to read with the pandemic stuff. It makes me very aware of how little skills I have as a human. Like, I don't know how to do anything in terms of fixing machinery or like electronics. Like, in a post-pandemic world, I'm realizing I am a dead weight. Like, sitting with that discomfort sometimes is difficult in these pandemic books, and it does make me want to learn some skills. I need to learn some skills, maybe some basic car mechanic skills, maybe some basic home repair skills. Maybe I should look into foraging local foods, because, you know, that's eco-friendly. It's also probably good for the environment if I start planting native plants that are good for the species and also eating. It just made me think about, like, there are some huge gaps in my knowledge as a human. I can write a mean essay, but I cannot eat off the land to save my life. So I did enjoy this. it's given me some food for thought in terms of what I want to read and learn. I would recommend picking this up if you can handle pandemic fiction. I finished this on December 26th. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and this came from my TBR. I treated myself to this wee ghost story. So I have been seeing these everywhere while Christmas shopping. Various indie bookstores were carrying these ghost story for Christmas, and it's exactly what it says in the tin. It is a creepy ghost story that has been printed in these stocking stuffer sized editions. They've been illustrated with these very graphic black and white illustrations, and this was fun. So I read The Doll's Ghost by F. Marion Crawford, and this is about a doll that is broken and is taken to a doll hospital, and the doll doctor sometimes falls in love with these dolls, but he really falls in love with Nina. Creepy things start to happen when he finally repairs the doll and sends it home with his daughter. I will say this story was a little bit meh, but the idea of starting a Christmas tradition for myself of reading a ghost story on Christmas, I do like that. Like, to spend Boxing Day being a potato, sitting down with a creepy story. I think I would like to start this tradition for myself. So the story itself, 3 out of 5 stars. I finished this on December 26th as well, and this was a new buy. I was actually keeping warm, and my partner went into one store, and I decided to duck into a bookshop, and I found a copy of Gwendy's Magic Feather by Richard Shizmar, and I picked it up because I found it used. Like, I was in the store keeping warm. I figured I'd buy something while, you know, occupying their space for selfish reasons. So that motivated me to pick up Gwendy's Button Box by Stephen King and Richard Shizmar. So this is about a young girl named Gwendy. It's a novella, short, sweet, fun. We have Randall Flagg making an appearance as Richard Ferris, and when 12-year-old Gwendy meets Richard Ferris and is gifted this magic Pandora's box of sorts, we follow her as she is tempted by this box and as she learns about this box. And it's not as dark as you would expect, given that Randall Flagg, chaos bringer extraordinaire, has gifted a child a box with the power to cause disaster on all major continents and or press the black button and blow up the entire world. Like, it's not as dark as it could get, giving a 12-year-old that power. But I did really enjoy this and immediately picked up the sequel. So I finished Gwendy's Button Box on December 26th. A lot of things happened December 26th. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and this came from my TBR. This has been on my TBR for a while. But it brings me to reading this new buy, which is Gwendy's Magic Feather. So we pick up with Gwendy many, many years later. She's now in her 30s. She is the youngest. She's some sort of American politician. She's not a senator. I'm not American. I don't remember quite what she is. A congressperson? The Button Box magically appears. It magically comes back into her life in a time when there is a serial killer loose in her hometown over Christmas. Oh, that's the other thing. This ended up being like a surprise holiday read. It takes place over Christmas. So the Button Box comes back into her life. Gwendy goes home for Christmas. Her mother's cancer has reemerged. What will Gwendy do with a magic box? And I really enjoyed this as well. I flew through this. I believe I finished this on December 27th. I'm giving this 4 out of 5 stars as well. It's just fun, and it's interesting to watch someone wrestle with the corrupting powers of the Button Box. It's also interesting to see somebody play with Stephen King's characters, because you'll notice that Gwendy's Button Box is a Stephen King idea that Richard Shizmar was sort of brought onto this dead project of Stephen King's, and they collaborated and they brought this story back to life. According to this foreword, Richard Shizmar approached Stephen King and was like, hey, I have this idea of Gwendy re-encountering the box. Can I play with this? And King went, go forth and play with Gwendy. It
ooh, that sounds dirty. Go forth and play with this character, play with this world. Apparently in 2022, the third, Gwendy's Final Task, the two of them are both credited on that book. So it looks like they've come together a third time to play with this Gwendy character, this Castle Rock universe, this idea. I think that's going to be one of the books that I allow myself to purchase. In an upcoming video, I'm going to talk about my reading goals, and one of those goals is to set myself a strict shopping list of what I am allowed to buy, and then really try a no buy year with books. Once I have that little shopping list set, there will be no wiggle room, because I have so many unread books behind me. So before we go, we have to thank my patrons for making videos like this possible. Patrons tip me so that you folks can have videos for free. I'm gonna link a video up above that talks about changes to the Patreon tiers and changes to the book clubs that I host. You heard me mention 2 book club books that were patron exclusive book clubs this year. We're gonna try out opening it up to everybody. So do take a look at the video if you are interested in joining the book clubs, in getting a little bit more information on what's happening with Patreon. Thank you patrons for your support throughout the year. I hope you are all doing well, that you are staying safe, and I will see you soon with another video. Bye!